Today's lesson is working from home the new way to work? Hi, everybody. My name is Roger.
And my name is Helen.
And today we're going to continue to try to answer this question. Is working from home the new way to work? Are we going to keep working at home since we started doing so during the pandemic, or is it going to fade away and we'll all just go back to the office again?
Right. So for some people who have already been working in the office for some time, maybe it's a welcome situation to be able to work from home. But I'm imagining a lot of students who have had to study from home or go to their classes virtually by taking classes online, whether the idea of having to continue their duties from home, such as working from home, is a welcome situation. Perhaps for younger people, it's much better to be able to work from an office because they've already been taking classes from home for so long.
Yeah, and of course, there's a difference between people who work with things and people who work with people. And say if you're a doctor or a counselor or something like that, you pretty much have to be in face-to-face contact with people, especially if you're performing surgery on somebody. If you're a doctor or something like that, you do need to go into the office or the hospital or the clinic. But if you're, working on computer programs or designing blueprints for some kind of apartment complex or something like that, it may be okay to work from home as well. So it depends on your career. It depends on your field. And yeah, if you're going to school or whatever. So there are various ways to answer this question, but let's continue to actually deal with this question in today's lesson. Let's now listen to the first part.
Although many employees are in favor of working from home, it's still unclear what kind of working model companies will ultimately adopt to meet this trend. While a complete shift to working from home probably won't happen anytime soon, some companies are considering implementing work schedules that combine working from the office and working from home.
大家好，第一部分我们看到片语 in favor of 加名词或是动词 ing， 表示支持或是赞成点点点。例如 I'm in favor of any policies that make housing more affordable. 我支持任何让住宅更能负担得起的政策。或是Bernice said she was in favor of having burgers for dinner, but I'd rather have pasta. Bernice 说她晚餐想吃汉堡，但我更想吃意大利面。另外补充一个同义片语 in somebody's or something's favor， 表示支持或是赞同某人或物。举例来说 The tennis match was decided in Kevin's favor, and he went on to win the championship. 网球比赛的判决有利 Kevin， 于是他一路赢得冠军。接着我们看到名词 shift， 指改变或是转移，像是 The political ideas expressed by the speaker have caused a shift in public opinion. 那位演讲人表达的政治理念已造成民意的转变。另外，除了上面的意思，这个字还有以下两种用法。第一，指轮班或是轮值时间。例如 Jim likes working the late shift at the restaurant because it is usually quieter.Jim 喜欢在餐厅轮晚班，因为那时通常比较安静。第二，这个字也可以当动词，指转移或是挪动。举例来说 Please shift your attention to the following page. 请把注意力转移到下一页。或是 Caroline shifted the books so she could grab the letter that was under them. Caroline 挪动了那些书，这样她才能拿到书下面的那封信。
So now we're going to look at what companies think about working from home. Are they in favor of it or not? Although many employees are in favor of working from home, it's still unclear what kind of working model companies will ultimately adopt to meet this trend. So there is a trend of working from home. A trend is a situation that is popular or that is widely practiced during a particular period of time. In this case, working from home these days have become a trend because a lot of people are doing it, but it's unclear whether the companies will ultimately adopt this working model as something that will become permanent. So to adopt means to decide to begin using something, a particular plan or method in the future. So a company can adopt a new working model, or scientists may adopt a new method for conducting experiments.
So here we've got the word adopt, and don't confuse that with the word adapt. To adapt means to kind of make some changes to something in order to make it fit with something else, but to adopt means to bring something else totally in. Like you can adopt a child, you can adopt a dog from a pet shelter or something like this. So yes, can companies adopt to this trend? Can they make the necessary changes so that people can work from home and the company can still make a decent profit?
Yes, and the phrase here, in favor of, just means to support an idea. So I could say, for instance, I could ask a group of people, who is in favor of having hot pot for lunch? And then people will raise their hands if they are in favor of hot pot, or they may be in favor of having something else for lunch. So to be in favor of just means to support an idea, to support a proposal.
Yep, you can be in favor of the president's new law or something like that. And yes, indeed, lots of employees are in favor of work from home. But yeah, what about the companies? Well, here's the next sentence. It says, while a complete shift to work from home, or WFH, probably won't happen anytime soon, some companies are considering implementing work schedules that combine working from the office and WFH. So it is true that we won't have a complete 100% shift. No, companies are not going to close down and move from their office building and become just a computer company or one that exists in cyberspace only while everybody works at home. That's not going to happen anytime soon. Anytime soon could also be expressed as soon. It's not going to happen soon. In other words, it's going to be quite a few years before that actually happens. If you talk about a shift, that means a change, a big change.
Yes, and the word implement here means to use a plan or a system. So a company can use or implement a new computer system to streamline or to improve its work productivity.
That's right. To implement means to put into action, to start, adopt this particular way of doing things. And yes, companies may do sort of a 50-50 sort of thing. Some of you can come in, some of you can work at home, or we can exchange, we can trade once in a while. That might work out. So, of course, this is going to take some time for companies to figure out exactly what they're going to do. And it might be interesting, and companies may become more productive as a result, and there may be lower unemployment as a result. Who knows? Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson for today. Let's move on and talk some more about this topic.
Unsurprisingly, the companies at the forefront of such hybrid work models are the tech giants. Microsoft, for instance, wants to allow working from home less than 50% of the time for most roles, and IBM has proposed a remote work system in which 80% of its employees will work at least 3 days a week in the office. Google is also offering work schedules with greater flexibility than the ones before the pandemic. Nevertheless, employees are still expected to live within commuting distance of the offices, so the idea of holding a virtual meeting while you sip a cocktail on a tropical beach is out of the question.
第二部分我们看到单字 forefront， 这个字是名词，指最显要的位置，最重要的地位。例如，The company I work for is at the forefront of computer technology. 我任职的公司在电脑科技领域位居重要地位。另外补充一个包含 forefront 的相关片语 ，bring something to the forefront， 表示将点点点列在首要位置，彰显出来。举例来说 ，Those incidents have brought the issue of children's safety to the forefront of public consciousness. 那些事件让孩童安全的议题成为大众首要关注的重点。或是 The organization's mission is to bring issues affecting orphans to the forefront. 该机构的任务是将对孤儿们有影响的事件凸显出来。再来我们看到形容词 hybrid 指混合的，例如 A hybrid car is said to be more eco-friendly. 据说油电混合车比较环保。最后我们看到片语 be out of the question， 表示不可能的、办不到的或是无法接受的。例如 The small island doesn't have an airport, so flying there is out of the question. 这座小岛没有机场，所以不可能搭飞机到那里。或是 The teacher said that using calculators during the math test was out of the question. 老师说考数学时不准使用计算机。
Unsurprisingly, the companies at the forefront of such hybrid work models are the tech giants. So here we're talking about hybrid work models because before we were saying that perhaps companies will begin to adopt a combination of working from home and working from the office. So such a system, a combination of working from home and working from the office, would be considered a hybrid work model because the word hybrid here means a mix of different things or styles. Now we know what a hybrid car is. A hybrid car is one that runs on both gas and electricity. So similarly, a hybrid work model combines both working from home and working from the office. And it's not a surprise or unsurprisingly that the companies that are at the forefront or at the front of such hybrid work models are the tech giants.
Right, they're at the cutting edge of this industry. They are the leaders. So the companies at the forefront of these hybrid work models are tech giants, okay? The giant companies that are involved with technology, Google, Microsoft, etc., etc. So that's not surprising because they're the ones who know all about this. If you want to work at home, you've got to have that high technology. So let's talk about Microsoft, for example. It says Microsoft, for instance, or for example, this company wants to allow WFH less than 50% of the time for most roles. And IBM has proposed a remote work system in which 80% of its employees will work at least 3 days a week in the office. So these are the ideas they've come up after trying this out during the pandemic. So Microsoft, they want to allow work from home less than 50% of the time for most roles. Okay, so they're not willing to go 100%, but they like the idea of near 50% or less than 50%. That is what they've decided. And then we've got IBM, and they've got something else here. 80% of its employees will work at least 3 days a week in the office, and I guess all the other times they'll be working at home.
Right. So it seems that even though these companies are considering a hybrid model, the result is still their workers will spend most of their time working from an office. So working from home is just an option, but it's not going to take up the majority of the working schedule. And similarly, Google is also offering work schedules with greater flexibility than the ones before the pandemic. So Google apparently still has not decided on a specific working model, a formula for work from home or working from the office, but they do say that the model is going to offer greater flexibility than the model that they had before the pandemic began. So flexibility refers to the ability to change or to deal with a situation that changes. To be flexible means that you can go with the flow of the situation, be able to adapt to different situations, and Google is willing to be flexible. It promises flexibility in the working schedule.
Yep, so flexible, that's the adjective. Flexibility is the noun. So some companies may be flexible, some may be more traditional or rigid or standard. So if you have a flexible work schedule, maybe you need to come into the office, maybe you can work at home, maybe you can decide. But if the schedule is fixed or if it's standard or rigid, you've got to work 9 to 5. You've got to punch in at 9 o'clock. You can leave at 5 o'clock, and there is no compromise there. You've got to do that, so there's no flexibility with that. So Google here is offering flexible work schedules. and they'll be more flexible than the ones they had before the pandemic. Nevertheless, even though these things are true, this is still true. Nevertheless, employees are still expected to live within commuting distance of the offices. So the idea of holding a virtual meeting while you sip a cocktail on a tropical beach is out of the question. So maybe some of you are thinking, hey, I'm going to buy a nice beachside house down in Taidong, and I'm going to work from there. And I'm going to work from there for my company that's up in Taipei. Nope, it's not going to happen. Things are not going to be that flexible. You still need to live within commuting distance. So if your office is in Taipei, hey, you need to live in the Taipei area. You can't live farther away than, say, Taoyuan or something like that. You've got to be close by. Commuting just means going to and from work or to and from school.
Yes, and the word nevertheless here is another connecting word, just like furthermore before. But here, nevertheless means despite the idea that you have already mentioned. So if you said something before, you can say nevertheless to say, well, despite that, something else is true. So I could say, for instance, I really don't like eating dessert. Nevertheless, I never turn down a piece of chocolate cake. So despite the fact that I don't like dessert, I do love chocolate cake, and I will always eat it when a piece is offered to me. So here, despite the fact that these companies are offering greater flexibility in work schedule, their employees are still expected to live not too far away from the companies, from the offices that they work for. And it's out of the question for them to be living or to be vacationing in a tropical beach far away from the company while they are still expected to be working for that company. So something that is out of the question cannot be considered. It is definitely not possible.
So get that idea out of your mind right now. There's no way you're going to live in Kending and still be employed for your company in Kaohsiung. It's just not going to happen. Forget it. It's out of the question. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's wrap things up by listening first to the final part.
As companies try to figure out realistic working models, one thing is clear. Work flexibility has become highly valued among employees. Thus, companies that continue to ignore this demand risk losing good employees to organizations that are willing to meet it.
So we're going to wrap up our discussion on, is working from home the new way to work? So is it? Is it going to be the new way of working? Well, as companies try to figure out realistic working models, one thing is clear. Work flexibility has become highly valued among employees. Thus, companies that continue to ignore this demand risk losing good employees to organizations that are willing to meet it.
Indeed. So yes, companies are trying to figure out these working models. They're kind of new to this. They just have the experience during the pandemic. And eventually, of course, the pandemic is going to subside. As Helen said earlier, it's probably never going to totally go away, but eventually things will more or less return to normal. And so these companies will need to figure out these working models or these schedules. But as they do this, one thing is still clear. Work flexibility is now highly valued among employees. They tried it, they like it, they'd like to continue with it, and they may threaten to quit if the company doesn't allow them to work from home at least once in a while. Thus, companies that continue to ignore this demand risk losing good employees to organizations that are willing to meet it. So that's basically what I just said here. Employees know this is out there. They know what this is like, and they're used to it, and they like it. So the companies need to adjust, or else they're going to lose some good people.
Right. And here the word demand is just a firm statement that people want something. So during the pandemic, there was a huge demand for surgical masks because everybody wanted or had to wear surgical masks every day. So there was a huge demand for it. Everybody wanted it, and it was well known that people wanted this thing.
Exactly. Demand. Okay, that's the noun, of course. We've got the law of supply and demand in the market with low supply and high demand, of course, prices are high. With high supply and low demand, then prices are low. You get the idea. So this demand risk, well, we've got this demand, so the companies will risk losing those good employees, and they may be attracted by other companies. I don't quite know how to translate the Chinese term 挖角, but maybe some companies will indeed try to get you to quit your company and work for their company and say, hey, you can work at home all you want. That company you're working for now treats you like a bum. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. It's time now to listen to our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一部分的第二句写到，尽管完全转变为居家办公或许在近期内不会发生，但有些公司怎么样怎么样。好，文中在这边他用到 while 来表达尽管。然后看到课文第二部分最后一句，他提到说，一边在热带海滩上啜饮着鸡尾酒，一边举行虚拟会议。这边他则是用 while 来表达出一边怎么样一边怎么样的语义。我们就顺便来学习 while 当连接词的不同意思。好，第一种呢是课文用法，我们用 while 来引导让步副词子句去表达说虽然怎么样尽管怎么样，意思就会跟 though although 一样，只是要特别注意 while though although 这几个连接词呢不能再跟连接词 but 一起使用哦。这些连接词呢只需要择一使用就可以表达出虽然怎么样但是怎么样的语义了。好，例如 While the apartment is small, it's pretty expensive. 尽管这间公寓很小，但它相当贵，所以我们这边就不用再加一个 but 去表达但是，因为 while 本身就可以表达出尽管怎么样但怎么样了。好，再来呢，第二个是你可以用 while 表达在什么什么期间与什么什么同时，意思就相当于 when。例如The phone rang while he was taking a shower. 他在洗澡的时候电话响了。好，那这边要补充一下 while 当这个意思来解释时，如果它连接的两个子句主词一样，我们其实可以省略 while 后方的那个主词，然后把动词改分词，也就是说 while 引导的那个副词子句会被简化成 while 加上 VING 或者是 PP。 例如He listened to music while studying, 就是说他一边念书一边听音乐。第三个我们可以用 while 来表达而然而，这时候是用来连接两个对比或是不同的陈述，意思相当于 whereas。 例如 While Brian likes to travel with his friends, his brother prefers to travel alone. Brian 喜欢跟朋友一起旅行，而他哥哥喜欢独自旅行。我们这边就是用 while 去呈现两个不同的陈述，怎么样而怎么样。好，再来接着读到课文第三部分的第一句。As companies try to figure out realistic working models... 好，这边它用到 figure out 这个片语动词，我们来学它的不同意思及用法。好，第一种以事物当受词的时候，它表示搞清楚、弄明白或是想出，像是想出某个办法、解决方案等等。那在这个用法当中 figure out 后面也常常会接用 WH 疑问词所引导的名词子句或者是名词片语。那这个名词片语我们指的就是 WH 疑问词加上 to 加原形动词所构成的。举例来说 I can't figure out how to install the software. 我搞不清楚要怎么装这个软体。再造个例句 It took him an hour to figure out the math problem. 他花了1个小时解开那题数学题。好，那么第二个是以人当受词的话， figure out 表示理解、了解，像是理解某人的行为。例如 Her little brother acts weird sometimes. She just can't figure him out. 他年幼的弟弟有时候举止怪异，他就是搞不懂他。好，那以上是今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天单字吧。
Adopt. To save money, the company has adopted energy-saving measures. Shift. That country has experienced a shift in cultural values over the past few years. Implement. The proposal was promising, but it was never actually implemented. Flexibility. Most employees expect a little flexibility from their employer. Nevertheless, Evan was exhausted. Nevertheless, he continued walking up the mountain. Commute. Peter commutes for an hour and a half each day to get to work. Demand. The workers came up with a list of demands in the meeting.
Discussion starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter for today. It's a question that's designed to start a discussion. If you had the option, would you prefer to work from home or in the office, and why?
Well, personally, I'd prefer to work from home rather than working from an office. For one thing, I would be able to stay in my pajamas all day and eat when I want. And for another, I could keep my cats company because they get lonely when I'm not around.
Well, I think I'd rather continue to work in the office because if I work at home, I won't have the chance to ride my bicycle to work. I love doing that. I've done that every day for many, many years. And if I work at home, it would be really boring. I wouldn't have the chance to get out there in the fresh air in the winter and in the summer. So yeah, I'd prefer to work in the office. Plus, I like being around all those wonderful people. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I'm Helen.
See you next time.